nyanja chembor to da hingmi jang dong mon chembor ngabya da bakar dar ngam zando shermer do tumba tu je chan la gi jom tar. We will continue studying the Surangama Sutra in our next session as always. Before we begin our study, I would just like to take a moment to bring up or mention one or two things here, just to clarify. Well, the first thing is that I want to mention. Now, at this moment, there are quite a few people listening to the teachings, and there are also some from various different, I suppose, perhaps different sects. There are indeed many Buddhists all around the world, and some people without religious belief, whatever situation. It's truly wonderful that everyone is learning together as we live in this world each and every day, whether it is in terms of religion or other aspects. Learning is extremely important, truly essential, because by learning and recharging ourselves, our wisdom and our actions, as well as our thoughts and intentions, will all keep improving. If we ever stop learning, even for a moment at all, then our wisdom and compassion will inevitably come to a standstill. This, I believe, is the necessity of our study. At the same time, actually, in the process of our study and practice, everyone should have the mindset of getting along well. This particular kind of attitude, because now, whether it is different sects or different teachers, or various different schools and traditions, if there is always sense of exclusion and conflict and mutual slander, then as well, perhaps our entire group or community as a whole will not, as a result, be at peace, especially for those of us who in particular study Mahayana Buddhism. Everyone should truly, from the bottom of their hearts, have a sense of love for one another and interact with a sense of compassion. This is really very important. Sometimes on certain occasions, when we go to other sects or come into contact with followers of other traditions, we find they often conflict. When we hear about this, it makes it hard to develop faith in the entire tradition. So from an individual perspective, when you really think about it, our interactions with each other should be relatively simple without many conflicts or issues, because humans as a species are quite complex, unlike some other animals. He is wise, capable, and competent. If we create conflicts, all sorts of issues can arise. So, in terms of our personal lives, specifically after studying Buddhism, we must progress and simplify things. No matter which sect or tradition someone belongs to, whether they have faith or not, everyone should really just, as we discussed, be especially gentle and always treat everyone kindly and patiently. This is what I wanted to talk about today. Just briefly for a moment, mentioned days ago, it's generally best that our disposition is not rough or harsh. If everyone gets hurt interacting with you, such a practitioner, if you can fly in the sky or dive to the deepest, most mysterious and incredibly remote part of the ocean, I don't think that's praiseworthy. If a person's personality clashes with everyone, such a person, it should indeed be said, whether among Buddhists or in any other group, is truly frightening. That's actually one thing I wanted to talk about. Now, the second thing in our daily lives, each and every day, whether it's in the institute or outside, I hope that certain matters don't make it an exaggeration or blow it out of proportion. Sometimes when giving something to others, even in small ways, it gets linked to economic or political issues. Things get complicated in these cases. In the end, even as an individual, you may not really be able to
extricate yourself from it. Among Tibetans, there's a saying, if you try to throw someone else into the river, you might end up falling in and drowning yourself. So sometimes we really should, no matter if it's your neighbor or the people around you nearby, in many respects, a person should demonstrate the level of their spiritual practice. Some of our Buddhist practitioners and some monastics seem to still have many worldly habits and tendencies. In good deeds, they're especially lacking. For doing bad deeds, even small acts, it's often really disgusting. I hope everyone will try their best to cut off such behavior. Otherwise, you will end up inevitably bringing all kinds of suffering upon yourself. If you intend to harm others, this malicious habit might reflect back on you. And after some time, perhaps unexpectedly, it may hurt you and others, or perhaps just yourself without being able to harm others. That's possible. So after we study Mahayana Buddhism, we should eliminate the intention to harm others. This is indeed extremely important. Otherwise, nowadays, there are some Buddhists who often claim to be Buddhists, but in reality, some of their actions are rather extreme and radical. Such behavior, whether done openly or in secret, should be witnessed by the three jewels, witnessed by the Buddhas, and we should not do anything that would make us feel guilty. This is very important. It is worth noting that this is the second point to make. And then the third point, we Buddhists today, in a certain sense, actually, indeed, in many respects nowadays, whether it's our good fortune, our talented people, or our abilities, in all aspects, in every possible way, we should truly have a different kind of progress, a kind that is unlike what we have seen before, different, because now within the Buddhist community, in fact, there are more and more talented people in every field. This is not about praising ourselves and belittling others. Many other religions should also have this kind of situation. But I think, for us Buddhists, actually, if we look at some individual monastics, they don't need fame or gain. These worldly 8 concerns, they try their best to let go of them, which is good. But for lay people, it's not the same as for monastics, where everything can be disregarded without concern. We might be at the end in this human society. We might actually end up falling behind in the end. So for some of you, perhaps in the secular world, whether you are lay practitioners or followers, you should, I think, earn money when you need to earn money. The work of the job itself and practice when needed. We've talked about this before. Some of us Buddhists, as you may recall, you could say, have a dual identity. We need to be responsible for our faith and responsible for in this way, as we've seen over the past few years, Buddhists have quite good merit and fortune. Overall, it's pretty good. Few people whose merit is shallow, and there's nothing to be done about that. But for many people, whether it's doing charity work, for example, my own life is also good. They bring all kinds of benefits to those around them, employment opportunities, and have truly done a lot in many different ways for the people around them. Actually, I think this is also quite important. As a dedicated Buddhist community, if in the end we have no financial, no ideas, no power, if we have nothing at all, that gives others a certain and certainly influence and leadership or persuasive power over others, there will be certain challenges. So now in this world and in these special times, perhaps we now more than ever need to reflect, except for monastics who mainly rely on the 7 noble riches, focus on listening, but monastics can guide lay people to frequently engage in meaningful activities for society and humanity. We should really try our best to participate. We are Mahayana Buddhists. If we were followers of the hinayana or ordinary worldly paths. Focusing on ourselves would be enough. So I think that overall, as Buddhists today in our modern world, because we are accumulating merit, clearing obscurations, or from practicing mandala offerings, I'm not sure. But in all respects, practicing Buddhists since society now and globally many economies are in decline. There is much unrest and disharmony, and factors are increasing. However, for many Buddhist families becoming, and their good fortune keeps growing, even in various aspects of worldly life, in our daily experiences, whether it's appearance or status, there are many more aspects. This group is, as you may notice, different from before in many respects and in various ways. Now, with a younger demographic and many highly educated people studying Buddhism, indeed, overall things are actually quite good. In this regard, we should continue to make efforts. When you look at it from a particular point of view or consider it from a certain perspective, the Buddhist talents in various places nowadays should indeed, within the broader society, include many people from the upper echelons. This is something we should also be aware of. Therefore, we should all play our respective roles together. Because life is very short, we can live together in this world is uncertain for each of us. At a certain point, for this society, we should definitely try to do something truly meaningful in our lives. This is really what I wanted to just briefly mention to everyone in advance today. Overall, in general, because many devoted Han Chinese Buddhists, committed practitioners, and dedicated followers are now increasingly studying Tibetan. We need to study Theravada Buddhism as well as Chinese Buddhism, which is renowned. In fact, these are all actually from Sakyamuni Buddha. Compassion and wisdom combine different places, different regions, and have developed and extended from there. Each holds wisdom, nourished by compassion. So I think everyone would agree with me, should not look at these with a sense of rejection. Moreover, these, whether it is religions in the world or other worldly knowledge, we should all have a love of learning. This is also very important to note, especially for us in the future. Each person may, at some point, possibly need to research on their own, especially those of you who are better at studying people like this, for example. I think that each person, or at least some among you, might study the Shurangama Sutra, Lotus Sutra study, or study the Vimalakirti Sutra, Madhyamika Yogacara study, studying a history, or on a certain eminent monk or great master. As for the West nowadays, schools do such research, of course, in some Western schools. In fact, there are actually some particular specific examples. His economy also has something to do with it in some ways, because if you want to take on a research project, you need to secure a certain amount of, this may be why, but in the future, whether you are a monastic or a lay person, if you have a certain level of learning in this brief, your lifetime, it is very good to devote yourself to studying a single scripture in depth. At the same time, in terms of our mindset and our actions, we should regularly reflect on ourselves. In this way, as a practitioner, this should be very, very meaningful. We found these profound teachings, and the teachings I have been giving recently are mostly like esoteric teachings, many of them. So I feel that, personally speaking, in our lives, it is especially rare to come across these teachings. After obtaining these teachings, I feel even if I were to leave this world, I would have no regrets. everyone should accept them with great joy and with open hearts. Yesterday, when we began discussing the Shurangama Sutra thought on dependent origination, when considering sometimes I'm right, sometimes not, but regardless, it is still possible to observe. When I observe, I feel that perhaps sometimes in the Han Chinese regions, the Shurangama Sutra is currently being promoted even more vigorously and enthusiastically than ever before, with increased emphasis. As for Tibet, perhaps, and other Western countries, perhaps the situation is not as ideal, maybe just average. I think that in the future, in Tibet, this lineage, these things may not necessarily be so certain either. But for the Han region, it should also perhaps have its own particular dependent origination. Yesterday, the two Dharma friends we randomly tested, and the one who spoke in Chinese, in the end, she was moved to tears. I think this is also very good. This too is a kind of karmic connection. The English presentation was decent, but those who were translating were all a bit nervous. Later, I noticed among some of the English presentations that used to be everywhere, many switched giving Chinese talks. Yesterday, observing the dependent origination, there were some in Japanese and Korean. These are still being carefully preserved and spoken. So perhaps maybe this kind of dependent origination is not necessarily correct from a scientific perspective, half believing, half doubting, but sometimes these things are quite mysterious. I don't dare to say I don't believe, but I also can't say I fully believe. Yesterday afternoon, right before we officially started the talk, when we were reciting at the very beginning, some rainbows also occasionally appeared here at Larungar. And then, of course, that's one aspect. Having rainbows in the summer is nothing special. They can be seen everywhere. But on the other hand, yesterday it was a rainbow before the rain. The rainbow came first and then a heavy downpour. And there was also rolling thunder. Then other things appeared. But what exactly are these? Oh, these are, well, maybe nothing, or perhaps they represent something. But no matter what, I think everyone can take a look as well if they feel like it. This is nothing special, but they insisted on showing it to everyone they knew, and even to strangers. So I didn't refuse either. On one hand, since we are discussing the Shurangama Sutra, having this appear at the beginning is nice. But on the other hand, we won't become attached to these things. Many people attach to things, fortune telling or face reading. Some people often talk about your past life or your future life. I think these things are not that simple. Don't understand past, yet they tell others about their past and future lives. Only people who are rather naive might believe such things. If someone truly knew about past and future lives, that would be great. No need to learn many things now. But I really think it's not that simple. So in our era, when people see a rainbow, what do you see? Can you tell me? Then everyone becomes especially devoted to these things. This rainbow is inside. If you don't believe this inner light, that is also a kind of regret for Buddhists. This is not something I praise. The Shurangama Sutra's view also differs. However, these external phenomena under certain conditions and in some cases can also represent something in the past. When the precious Guru went to Deer Park during the empowerment ceremony, there appeared some especially good white clouds. Later, I returned to college. When we ceremoniously laid the foundation stone of our great sutra hall, the same clouds appeared once again. Then the king said, the teaching activities at Larungar, our business of sutra, preaching at Larungar. Later, after about 20 or 30 years, about 20 or 30 years later, perhaps saw them. Dependent arisings, indeed, quite truly remarkable. Of course, compared to the causes and conditions of the precious Guru and Larungar, ours are truly incomparable and cannot be mentioned in the same breath. Therefore, for us, all shouldn't judge by appearances. If you cling to appearances per the Shurangama Sutra, the greatest demon is attachment to appearances. So when we haven't learned yet, that would be rather, truly, and honestly quite frightening. So what is actually most important for us? Everyone needs to recognize their own mind. In the Shurangama Sutra, what is the main teaching? It is the original nature of our own mind, the Buddha nature, because this Buddha nature, when explained, is sometimes quite profound and difficult to comprehend. For this reason, many scholars later on, especially those in academic circles, found it hard to accept. There are elements in it of permanence and reality, and also something related to the divine self, Atman. As a result, they felt Buddhism acknowledges that everything is empty. So how could there be a divine self within it? Such claims exist. If so, if this is really so, in terms of terminology, then in the Ratnakottara Vibhaga treatise on Buddha nature, it directly speaks of permanence, bliss, self, and purity. So these scholars might be even more alarmed when they see this. Therefore, sometimes when we look at it, it's only through systematic study we learn that the original and authentic teachings of Buddhism are not. So concluding independently of a teacher, there are difficulties to understand. So I think today we will continue our discussion. As I mentioned yesterday, as I said before, former monks and masters also placed great importance on this. Since the translation of the Shurangama Sutra during the Tang Dynasty, and later, whether in the Song, Yuan, or Ming dynasties, the renowned great masters of each era have produced many commentaries and sub-commentaries. A foreign scholar once, quite roughly, counted there are currently 127 books of commentaries on the Shurangama Sutra, especially Chan Master Zibo, Master Ui, as well as Master Liangqi. Of course, the four eminent monks of the Ming Dynasty, they placed particular emphasis on this. After that period, during the Republic of China era, there were many great monks and masters at that time. For example, Master Shuyon, and Master Hongyi, and Master Yingguang, as well as Master Yuan Ying, the renowned Buddhist monk whom we talked about yesterday, and Master Tai Shu, and Tangsu, author of Recollections. All of them, every single one, truly and deeply, without exception, feel this way very much. Advocated for everyone to study the Shurangama Sutra. Sometimes when I look at those few short years of the Republic of China era, it does seem like there was an extraordinary emergence of eminent monks and great virtuous teachers at that time. Now, there remain many eminent monks, but those who truly expound the teachings, especially teachings of these great predecessors, there are fewer and fewer people who continue to promote it. So I think that as later generations of students in the future, wherever we are, we must carefully find ways to promote the authentic Dharma. Nowadays, among Dharma teachers and abbots in some temples, many of them, as you can probably see, are actually like that. And there are also some who give teachings and run Buddhist colleges. But there are some who spend all day discussing things like whether they can join the Buddhist Association, join political consultative conference, or whether they can establish a temple somewhere. The more temples, the better. But the main thing is that among ourselves, having status is also acceptable. And this too can be a convenient way to spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. However, we shouldn't place the greatest importance on these matters. For example, some monastics buy a small piece of land somewhere and want to start some kind of project there and so on. If we're discussing things, they may not be very important especially for monastics. What is our overall responsibility for the future? It is to establish Dharma centers in more places. And then, when it comes to people's minds in particular, to do all we can to tame and change minds. This is indeed the true responsibility of monastics, certainly. So, looking carefully at the situation, both domestically and abroad as it stands now, compared to eminent monks and masters of the past, the scriptures and treatises they especially emphasized and promoted in particular are indeed not in quite an ideal state anymore. It seems that things are, one could say, perhaps in some respects, that after the ROC era, many temples and institutes that teach and expound the Dharma in various places do exist, but their influence is not what it used to be. This is something everyone can clearly see. So I think whether we are monastics or the great masters within the temples, we must consistently devote our efforts and energy to the propagation of the authentic Dharma. And many great benefactors and devoted lay practitioners should also support eminent monks and great masters everywhere, so that they can help to spread the authentic Dharma. Support is needed in this area, and indeed, in this regard, additional support is required. We should do things that are meaningful. Of course, as for our Tibetan region, for a period of time in the past, due to the Cultural Revolution, it had a great impact on all places. At that time, many monasteries were already destroyed. Now they have basically all been restored. On the economy and many other aspects in the Tibetan region, there are almost no difficulties now. Therefore, in the past, many benefactors from the Han region, these are for monasteries and schools in Tibet, this support is significant. We are truly especially grateful for this. Many of you have contributed to various places in Tibet, to monasteries, schools, and care homes of different traditions. In future, this support must continue, but on the other hand, we should all come together, focus on studying the scriptures and commentaries, share the authentic Dharma. Dharma means teachings realization. Everyone should definitely be clear about this point. Now, as we now promote the Shurangama Sutra, now this may still be necessary, so everyone really needs to work hard. I hope many of us will make aspirations, and in this very lifetime, we should each strive to spread the Dharma. Making a silent vow is sufficient. It's not necessary to raise your hand. Some people raise their hand, but then you just put it down and forget all about it. This is completely useless. If you truly have this vow in your heart, you won't forget it. So everyone should propagate. Now, what are we discussing today? It's actually about the Shurangama Sutra. Earlier, we talked about the name of this Buddhist scripture. The name is actually simply, there is a reason for giving it a name. If there were no names, the world would fall into ignorance. If names are not spoken, everyone in the world would be confused. It is to dispel confusion that names and words are established. This is from the Lankavatara Sutra. Our previous translation was a little different, but in essence, this is the meaning. Many great masters in Tibetan regions, when they begin explaining names of treatises, will now cite this scriptural proof. Therefore, in our world as we know it, having such names is very important. The Shurangama Sutra also has this name. As for this name, for those with sharp faculties, seeing the name shows the content. For those with average faculties, they can grasp the general content. If someone has lesser faculties, then regarding the name, they can reliably depend on the name or title in order to look for and find the book and so on. This is very necessary. Therefore, If there were no names, our entire world would become truly ignorant. If people, no places had names, things had no names, it would be very confusing, especially for everyone involved. So it is still necessary to have such names. Also, the names of sutras are different. Perhaps this was just mentioned before as well. For example, the name of this sutra, some are titled solely with a person's name, such as the well-known Amitabha Sutra and the Vimalakirti Sutra. These are all, in fact, named after people. Some are named after Dharma teaching. Nirvana Sutra and Prajnaparamita Sutra, these are named solely after specific teaching. Some are named using metaphors such as the well-known Buddhist scriptures, the Jewel Cloud Sutra and the Straw Sutra. The Shashtika Sutra is also because it uses straw for karma, causality, 12 links. There is also the Brahmanet Sutra. These are often named using metaphors and language. Some are named after people in Dharma teachings with both in the name. K. Shittigarbha, original vow sutra, Shittigarbha Bodhisattva person. And the teaching is the original vows. That's how it's named. Some are named after both people and metaphors. This is the Tathagata's Lion's Roar Sutra scripture. Tathagata, lion roar. Tathagata is the person. Lion's roar is the metaphor. That's the name's origin. Some are named after both teachings and metaphors. For example, the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Dharma and so on. Some cases have person, Dharma, an analogy. For instance, the Avatasaka Sutra, Flower Garland Sutra. Great, expansive is the teaching. Buddha, the person. Then flower garland, that means adorned with flowers, which is the metaphor. So as you can see, there are several different approaches or methods for naming these sutras. As for the Shurangama Sutra, it should also include a person, a key teaching, and a memorable metaphor. Some Dharma masters can explain it in detail from 3 different aspects. There are many valid ways to interpret this. So today, let's start with the title of the Shurangama Sutra and give everyone a brief introduction. Shurangama Sutra's full name is The Great Buddha's Crown, Tathagata's Secret Cause, Ultimate Teaching, Foremost Shurangama Sutra. This particular name is actually rather long. We usually just refer to it as the 3 characters, Shurangama Sutra. But if we actually look at the modifiers that come before it, there are quite a few elements. The first is the Great Buddha's Crown, then Tathagata's Secret Cause, cultivation certification, myriad practices. So there are actually about 4 or 5 modifiers that preceded first on Great Buddha's Crown. Actually, Great Buddha's Crown has 2 layers of meaning. One meaning is that specifically, the Shurangama Sutra is the supreme vehicle among all sutras. Just like when we talk about Vajrayana, the highest of the 9 vehicles, a teaching standing the pinnacle of all vehicles. So when we say Great Buddha's Crown, great means all-encompassing, universal, and complete. Buddha means the highest state of realizing the mind's true nature. Crown means surpassing all, transcending everything. In this way, in fact, Shurangama Sutra should be considered in our entire human world. There's no way to surpass it. It's just like when we often speak of the supreme secret teachings, it can also be said this way. Or speaking from the perspective of analogy, the Great Buddha Crown, Vairocana Buddha. It can also be said this way. Or when we speak of the Great Buddha's Crown, great means Dharma, and Buddha's Crown means it is the highest and unsurpassable, beyond all reach. Such unattainability, as mentioned in some scriptures, is like the Buddha's crown itself, which is in fact extremely difficult and challenging to truly and fully fathom or comprehend. In one scripture, it is said that when the Buddha was present at Deer Park, there was one from other eastern Buddha fields, a bodhisattva called Yinki Bodhisattva, sustaining bodhisattva. This Yinki Bodhisattva thought at that time, where exactly is the top of the Buddha's Ushnisha flesh protuberance? He slowly followed the light emanating from it. Using his powers, he ascended to the upper worlds. He passed through worlds, many, but even there, actually, he still could not find the edge of the Tathagata's crown. Later, when he descended, he said, if you wish to see the Buddha's crown, you will never see it. He wanted to see this crown for himself, but could never do so. So, from this analogy, we can see it is also extremely difficult to find the limits of the Buddha's crown. When Prince Siddhartha, the young prince, was just born, he actually had a very majestic and impressive Ushnisha, that is a flesh protuberance. Later, it became hidden from view. Then, when he attained enlightenment, when he became Buddha, it appeared again. There are many stories like this in Buddha's biographies. As explained here, first of all, the great Buddha crown should be said to be among all the Dharma teachings that we have available to us. If we use an analogy, it is like the Ushnisha of the Tathagata supreme and unsurpassed. Its limits cannot be found. Then, as for the Tathagata's secret causes, this Tathagata actually refers to one of the Buddha's 10 epithets, or to having truly and fully realized the true nature of all phenomena, which is also called Tathagata. In Mahaparinirvana, there is a very good scriptural proof which says, neither rising nor ceasing, neither aging nor dying, neither destroyed nor ruined, not a conditioned phenomenon. For this reason, it is called Tathagata. He has a lot of no here, it seems. So what is the true nature of the Tathagata? It is precisely this, neither arising nor ceasing, the true nature of all phenomena. Neither arising, ceasing, aging, dying, neither destroyed, unconditioned. It is in this sense that it is called Tathagata. If one attains such a state, for example, it is due to a kind of secret cause. Studying esoteric teachings, relying on this secret cause, we attain esoteric fruition. After diligently practicing the esoteric teachings for some time, here as well, there is a secret cause. As for this secret cause, it means that we first understand the content in the Shurangama Sutra, which is a significant Buddhist scripture. In fact, as a matter of fact, this is the cause. If we cultivate and realize such a cause, we will ultimately attain the fruition of Tathagata. Fruition of Tathagata is true nature phenomena. So within this, it also speaks about the secret cause of the Tathagata. This is the second aspect. The third is the realization of the Dharma here is not something understood through academic study, nor through discrimination or analysis, but rather it should be genuinely and sincerely practiced in everyday actions, understood through cultivation, through realization, truly. Moreover, this is especially of definitive meaning. It discusses the true Dharma of the luminous nature of mind. So it is indeed among the teachings, many are definitive, some not, but this is the Tathagata's ultimate definitive teaching. This Dharma directly points to the nature of mind. Therefore, it is called the Dharma of realization and definitive meaning. Bodhisattva acts because this particular sutra has already, in its comprehensive teachings, covered all of them from honest to 10th Bhumi Bodhisattvas. All of these meanings are already completely included here in this context. Self-benefit, benefit others. In other words, the present and the real, all of the Bodhisattvas' various activities and all such practices are also encompassed here. So here, from the perspective of people, it concerns Buddhas and their secret intent is found here. Then, as for its actual title or perhaps sutra name, it is called the Shurangama Sutra. I mentioned this yesterday, and in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it states Shurangama means all things ultimate, strict is called firm. When something is ultimately and completely firm, it is called Shurangama. Such a Shurangama Sutra, the Shurangama Sutra carries this kind of meaning in its teachings. Shurangama, or Buddha crown, as it can also be called, or everything then, in other words, strict means firm, courageous, and vigorous, or what is called Hua Wei Zhuo Wa, Tibetan pronunciation. If one attains samadhi, it is extremely firm and unshakable. So, what exactly is Shurangama? In the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it says actually this Shurangama, prajna, wisdom, Vajra Samadhi, the concept of, and also Buddha nature as well. All of these essentially mean the same thing. Lion's roar samadhi, Vajra Samadhi, Shurangama, Buddha natural, of these are the same in meaning. Therefore, the Shurangama scripture specifically mentioned here. In fact, it is a type of samadhi. But this samadhi, it's not a meditation. It represents all of the highest states of spiritual practice. Moreover, whenever we attain Shurangama samadhi, then in our worldly existence, we will not be destroyed by demons or heresy. Because on the surface, it seems like there is a story about the woman Matangi, and then there are many battles against demons within it, depicting this particular kind of state. But in reality, for us practitioners, it is a particularly supreme key instruction for transcending demonic states. If we look at the previous commentaries by certain people, including Master Yuaning, their commentaries also discuss this quite extensive. But some parts are difficult to understand. I follow the Tibetan and Chinese, the content of individual commentaries. To give you a simple and easy to understand, please name this topic for us. Make a short and concise introduction. So next, we will in the next step, also talk about the Shurangama Sutra. As for the term sutra, well, in a text called the Miscellaneous Abhidharma Heart Treatises, it explains that the word sutra has 5 distinct meanings, which are commonly referred to as sutra, also spelled as sutra. Sutra has 5 meanings. The first is originating as a term. In fact, within the Buddhist scriptures themselves, they can give rise to various different and subtle meanings. On the surface, seems Shurangama Sutra thin, but in reality, it can generate all kinds of different meanings. This is the first meaning. The second is called, which is known as springing forth. If our own wisdom can keep up, then its use is inexhaustible, like a spring of water. We can keep studying it endlessly. Actually, the Shurangama Sutra, if we learn it lifelong, there will still be more content for you and others to discover. Every Buddhist scripture is like this. The third is revealing. It reveals various meanings. It appeared. If shown hidden, and through the Buddhist scriptures, it can be revealed. Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, is present in sentient beings. But if you don't realize it, by relying on the scriptures, see the radiance of the Tathagata Garbha, and you can actually manifest it if you truly believe in it. The meaning of emptiness is also inherently, without Buddhist scriptures guidance, many can't realize it. Therefore, it has the function of revealing. The fourth is simply measuring line. It's like when a carpenter is working with wood, he first snaps a chalk line. By relying on this line, he won't go astray. Our practice, if we use standards from Buddhist scriptures, he can distinguish between good and evil, and we won't fall into wrong paths. The last one is called garland. As for garland, it can string many Dharma teachings. Just like with a beautiful flower garland, a single unifying thread can tie everything together, whether it's the ultimate truth or the conventional truth, as well as all the various worldly matters. In addition to everything else interwoven in Buddhist scriptures, everything is connected on a single thread. It can be completely displayed for us. That's why Buddhist scriptures, compared to worldly treatises and ordinary books in the world, have a unique and especially profound meaning. Why is it that nowadays some people truly read a classic lifetime or dedicate and devote their entire lives to studying, for example, just one sutra, and still may never finish learning or researching it fully and completely? This is because it holds such deeply profound meaning. A brief introduction to Buddhist scriptures. Next, let's take a moment to discuss and reflect on their translation. First, there was the highly respected monk from central India, Banchimidi, who was the chief translator. As mentioned yesterday, he was from central India and was also an extraordinary great bodhisattva. At that time, he served as the principal translator there. As the chief translator, he actually used Sanskrit because he was the one who brought this sutra and wrote it. So he knew then one by one, since he was also fluent in the languages of the four kingdoms, he translated it first, translating the content carefully, piece by piece. Then there was the kingdom of Wuchang. Wuchang was in northern India. Wujingguo, I suppose perhaps it is in some ways the same as this place, northern India, Uttarakuru. There was a Shramana from this place known as Migashika who lived here. Migashika is simply the translated name. As for his translation, originally Pranya had already done a general translation, and then carefully and thoughtfully following his particular method, step by step, as he had described, he translated it into full sentences and chapters, line by line, carefully. Perhaps the earlier part was translated roughly, he organized and refined it. Just like that. Then, at the historic and tranquil Nanlu Temple, located on the scenic Mount Luofu, there was a monk named Huaidi who verified the translation. This Huaidi acted as certifying translator. Because Huaidi was proficient in Chinese and fluent in Sanskrit, later, when Bodaruchi translated the Maharatnakuta Sutra, he brought him along. He assisted with the translation and served as the certifying translator. Because his professional certification, which was thoroughly reviewed, was sufficient, Tibetan Buddhist translations, great Lotsowas, master translators. He is the chief translator or as the final chief proofreaders. Because generally speaking, the best translation is involving people from both ethnic groups. Take Indian people, they express things using Indian content. Then Han people in Chinese grammar, if these two discuss together, because when switching between the two languages, there are many technical terms and conventions within, and many problems will arise. So two different languages is truly extremely necessary. So generally speaking, whether it's the Tibetan Tripitaka or treatises, when it comes to treatises, almost all of them, what exactly is a Pandita in India, actually? Which Tibetan Lotsuwas participated, and among them, who was the principal translator for this particular work, as for some translations. The early translations were by which Lotsawas and Panditas. The later translations were by which Lotsawas and Panditas. And then using the Sanskrit version from Kashmir in northern India as a reference, they would carefully proofread it again for clarity and accuracy. So now, our Tibetan Tripitaka, the revered collection of Buddhist scriptures, mainly the translators' names, this will appear in smaller text, displayed in a smaller font size at the end, and then at that particular time, during that moment, this Fangrong, his full title in front is too long, which is quite a mouthful, so I will not read it all. That's his official title. Wasn't he demoted and sent to Guangzhou? Even so, he still had so many impressive titles, not bad at all. Layman Fangrong was responsible for the transcription. Transcription here means polishing the text. Literary figure. He was a very talented and truly literary person, someone remarkable. In the end, he polished the text according to the style of classical Chinese. Because his editing might have differed a bit from the original later on. Some people also said that the Shurangama Sutra has a different style compared to other translated sutras. There is this kind of view due to his editing, is like the Zhuangzi or other classical Chinese works such as records of the grand historian, Shiji. Some of the words used in those texts are also found here. So for this reason, there have been debates later on. There's another issue that we need to consider here, specifically when it comes to the phrase Huaidi shaman. There are certain aspects or It appears in the earlier ancient versions, but in the later versions, including some current ones, Goryeo or Taisho Tripitaka, this phrase is not included in them, wasn't included, like Liangqi. All really believe that it should be included. As for why it wasn't included later on, it seems that there are also quite a few different opinions on this. But the reasons for this have not been explained so far. Huaidi. Some say because at that time, then Bodhiruchi, possibly in Chang'an, translating the Maharatnakuta Sutra, and it seems that this Indian Shramana, in a short time, finished the translation in Guangzhou and then left. So perhaps he was actually not in Guangzhou at that time, it seems. Some people simply use this as a reason, but this reason may, after so many years, back then, travel wasn't as easy. Now, it is still possible that at that time, because it is said that in the Guangzhou area, Indian monks were present. So he was very proficient in Sanskrit and fluent in Chinese. Regarding Huaidi, he really should have been one of the main translators here. But as it turns out, some versions of the product or release actually didn't include it. So regarding these issues, there has actually been some ongoing debate and discussion in China. As for these debates, when it is convenient, we may also need to briefly explain them to everyone. But as for this explanation, nowadays there isn't much during the Republic of China era. One of the main debates was whether the Shurangama Sutra was authentic or fake. There's been quite a lot said about this. And also the awakening of faith in the Mahayana. And the Perfect Enlightenment Sutra and these others, because at that time, some individuals, the reason for provoking such a controversy is actually later on, as time went by, many people gradually began to have doubts, which must have caused a very negative impact. Actually, as practicing Buddhists, we must be very cautious. I am always very worried about whether people who slandered the Dharma, where they are now, at this point in time, it's hard to say. Indeed, some of us, as you know, running a slaughterhouse is very frightening. Perhaps those who run slaughterhouses, in the end, will end up in hell. I don't know how long it will last. But if someone composes a treatise and affects many people, destroying their wisdom and lives, that simply kills them, negative karma is more terrifying. We studied a great commentary on aspiration. It cites many scriptural proofs and references regarding the slander of the Dharma. Therefore, as Buddhists with deep and unwavering faith, we must absolutely never, under any circumstances, get involved in these kinds of complicated matters, real or fake. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, in fact, as I said before, they say that the Shurangama Sutra may not be authentic. The reason for this is very simple. Because at that time, Layman Fangrong edited and polished it. This is really not acceptable. Or some people say that during the time of Empress Wu Zetian, the commentary on the Great Cloud Sutra was, in fact, deliberately fabricated. Because if this was forged, then under Wu Zetian's rule, Fangrong was her prime minister. As prime minister, to gain Wu Zetian's favor, he also fabricated the Shurangama Sutra, perhaps presenting it to her for such reasons. But this argument does not hold up, because regarding the Great Cloud Sutra, then there was such a claim in China. Great Cloud Sutra commentaries, there was the assertion that Wu Zetian received a prophecy. This claim later on, around the year 422 AD. In fact, when archaeologists made discoveries later, Great Cloud Sutra was done before that time. Yesterday's discussion, Wu Zetian died in 705 AD. After this sutra was translated in its entirety, December Wu Zetian died. But before that, about 260 years earlier, Great Cloud Sutra had already been translated. It was already done back then. Tan Wuchen and his group had already completed the translation. If it was translated by 422 AD, by 422 AD, most likely during the Northern Liang period, it had already been translated in that era. This is also confirmed by findings unearthed in Dunhuang. Later, archaeologists found Great Cloud Sutra was not created by Wu Zetian. Regarding this Great Cloud Sutra, found Tibetan translations, specifically in the early language translations, such as, indeed, in the Maharatnakuta Sutra. Whether it's really about Wu Zetian is hard to say, but there are many monks, masters, kings, and major patrons, all of whom have received prophecies. Prophecies are present in some sutras, the Buddha. There are indeed different people. At that time, some people believed that Wu Zetian was a celestial maiden before. In the future, she would rule in a certain place. There were many such claims. Being a king, the female way, in your own unique style, maybe it is possible because many prophecies are not that definite. Perhaps it is not possible. Historically speaking, it seems that Wu Zetian was not, and many people did not say, that she was the incarnation of a bodhisattva like Buddha. The way history describes her may not be like that either. But it is possible that regarding the true Dharma efforts, promoting true Dharma, she made a contribution that set her apart from other emperors. So some people say that because it is considered to be an apocryphal scripture, Fang Rong made it up at the time to please her. This kind of claim is simply untenable. That's just one aspect, for example. On another note, at that time, I briefly mentioned this yesterday, several distinguished scholars from the Republican era, they were especially renowned, expressed all sorts of doubts about this scripture. This was because at that time, there was a well-known Japanese scholar named Mochizuki Shinko. Someone like that. He was not a systematic student, even though he had already compiled some Buddhist dictionaries. He wrote an article in a magazine at the time. Japanese scholars did no research or checks. Now, there is a professor at San Francisco State University by the name of, he had a good analysis why ROC era scholars were influenced in this way and what the reasons were. Mochizuki Shinko, what kind of method exactly criticized the Shurangama Sutra, saying that it was actually not very good? What exactly was his argument? This reasoning has already been translated and explained before and after. Actually, it was very simple at the time. They sent someone to ask whether the Shurangama Sutra was authentic, but called spurious by a layperson. So for this very simple reason, no academics, even many of the most basic and fundamental principles simply couldn't be upheld, not even in the slightest. Later on, at that time, people like Liang Qichao and others were influenced by these scholars. Then word spread from 1 to 10 to 100 in Republic of China. They wrote some essays about either how it happened, but there was no real evidence at all to support it in any way. Some of the arguments questioning the Shurangama Sutra were that in the Shurangama Sutra there are many criticisms, refutations of immortals in Taoism. There are immortals in Chinese Taoism. Actually, in the context of Indian Buddhism, it is important to note that all kinds of immortals. When we study the extensive biography of the Buddha, Buddha's immortal, sometimes including the 5 bhikshus, they also received something in front of an immortal. Immortals can often be both positive and negative figures. There are many throughout Indian culture. In fact, there are actually quite a great many immortals. But these particular scholars, generally speaking, believe that one reason the writing is good, even great in our current Tibetan Tripitaka, currently, between early and later translations, some works, although Tibetan Buddhism, Trisong Detsen ordered all Indian treatises. Translating the Tripitaka had to follow the same set of rules. Translating personal names and place names, how to translate mantras, which words to use at sentence ends. There were some general rules established. However, Each translator's style is different. If wisdom differs, the writing style of scripture they translate will be truly, completely different. It's the same now. When we translate, for example, the current Tripitaka is translated to English and other languages. At this time, if the English translator is someone with particularly good writing skills, he described it the same way. This is like when we give speeches, the people who take notes in the audience each have their own style. Some polish the notes very well, while others do a mediocre job. If we say everything is fake for this reason, that argument honestly just doesn't really hold up either. One aspect in particular is the writing style. And then there are various things that are specifically mentioned inside, such as the concept of Tao or even references to immortals. And as I mentioned earlier, Tathagata Garbha called eternal. But this idea of being eternal is actually an externalist view. Buddhism. No, Buddhism always teaches emptiness and so on. But for many of these, they never actually conducted proper research or verification. Even though they were famous at the time, because of that reputation, they still had a significant influence. Later on, Master Taishu was right. Regarding the Shurangama Sutra, it should be like the Chronicle of the Buddhas and Patriarchs or Song monks' biographies. And also books like the Comprehensive Gazetteer of Guangzhou, Time, Place, People. All is explained, including the number of scrolls of the Shurangama Sutra, its content. And the translator, this is described clearly. Things you don't believe. And instead, after so many years have passed, you believe the words of just a few individuals. That is absolutely, truly laughable, yet that is really what they do. Later on, it seems that Master Lianqi said, if anyone claims that the Shurangama Sutra is a spurious scripture, demonic forces, or something along those lines, no matter what the situation is, such claims are not to be trusted. People unclear on this, if there are, as Buddhists, maybe, there is no need for us to argue with them. For ourselves, we should, when it comes to the principles of these scriptures, still adhere to them. Because if our wisdom has not yet matured, it's very easy to just follow what others say. This is fake scripture, pseudo-scripture. Many people, those who are not familiar with Buddhist scriptures, immediately keep saying, this is fake, this is unreasonable, because there's something in it. They themselves have some doubt. And if there are doubts, if you want to claim that it is fake, you must have clear and sufficient evidence, perception or inference. If you don't have this, and then you just find some similarities somewhere, use as reasoning that nowadays, for example, including Western figures like Aristotle, the books they wrote at the time, we say this is unreasonable, because verifying the era, history verifies, history doesn't acknowledge it, then in many other respects, we can't directly perceive it either. As for inference, everyone's reasoning, deduced, three-part syllogism, but when making such inferences, some arguments may not necessarily be reasonable. So I think that especially when specifically discussing such principles, everyone must have confidence. Without this confidence, it is hard to understand the content of the Buddhist scriptures. Those not listened, reflected, who have not systematically studied these teachings, whatever others say, and simply go along with them, that is not really very reasonable. So I think regarding this Shurangama Sutra for a period of time, others still have some debates. Regarding these debates, I believe these scholars did not have any malicious intent. They were probably trying to clarify what he has a scholarly spirit. This is something we also acknowledge. If you want academic spirit, it should be in a field of expertise. For example, if I wish to critique a concept in physics, I should first be a physicist myself. Otherwise, I am basically just simply comprehensive, formal, or systematic training in physics. And then I go around, for example, making claims or arguments to this society and all human society. Not a contribution. So if we want to conduct research, for example, first we need to understand what this Dharma, this sutra, is really about, and have reasonable grounds, and then making inferences. But in fact, this is still not very reasonable. And the future, in some areas, we can also come together with everyone and perhaps study more together. Otherwise, some of us perhaps are like irreversible bodhisattvas anyway. We completely and thoroughly understand the meaning of this sutra ourselves. No one can do anything about people like this. Some people have no faith in these sutras at all. For these people, there's really no need for us to say anything to them. But if things aren't clear, they waver and may develop wrong views. If we analyze things from a logical perspective, then it becomes clear. So this is how it's supposed to be. That's why, especially when considering the historical context and its broader significance and impact, this point is also very important. At that time, in academic circles in particular, their way of making judgments was different from ours in religion. Religion at its core actually involves faith in its essence. This faith is quite different from the kind of analysis we do in academia. Big difference between the two. So nowadays, some Western scholars, when it comes to Jokhyun, they say, there's no need to keep this secret. Anyone can make this public. When we went before, a few professors said, texts like the Lama's Heart Essence, make public. Read. There's absolutely nothing in there that needs to be kept secret at all. This kind of statement for him personally, well, he really thought so. But in reality, if we want to analyze a body of knowledge, we need to respect the other party's different culture and traditions, religious culture, or is it folk culture, or perhaps some other kind of culture, maybe? Then perhaps you really need to understand its background. And then how well have you yourself studied it so far? Discussed before refute Tibet Buddhism, then you first need to thoroughly understand Tibetan Buddhism. What exactly is Tibetan Buddhism like? If you want to refute Chinese Buddhism, then you first master Chinese Buddhism. You don't understand Chinese Buddhism at all, then you start making nonsensical claims about it. I think that's unreasonable. So today we'll just talk about it briefly. That means our discussion will be short and focused, and we won't go. The Shurangama Sutra is without a doubt indeed an excellent scripture, a classic of esoteric teachings with great blessing. When masters like Master Hanshen explained it, it is top-filled. When explaining the sutra's meaning, it was treated in this way. In the Taisho Tripitaka, it is placed among the esoteric scriptures. In China, consider a very profound esoteric instruction, core esoteric teaching. Therefore, by carefully and thoughtfully studying this important scripture with focus and intention, everyone should also know the secret cause of Tathagata. What helps realize, helps us to truly grasp the essential meaning of the Shurangama Sutra. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.
Sonandai Tamse Rogaya Tonani Dana Basi Tirgana Jirano Chupai Chupun Solen Droja
Bandarangara Badma Sodargye Bandarangara Badma Sodargye Bandarangara Badma Sodargye